It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show. It's Expresso right here on SABC3. Well, 100 years of Madiba's life has inspired many iconic and unforgettable moments. So it was a mammoth task for writer Kate Sidley to choose just 100 to share in her new book, 100 Mandela Moments. The author, editor and reviewer joins Expresso to share more about how it all came together. Kate, so good to have you on the show this morning.
Thanks for having me.
I'm loving that we are in Tata Madiba's centenary year. The spirit of Madiba is definitely alive. We've just come out of Mandela Month, but there's already been so much literature available about Tata Madiba and his life. What inspired you to put together this piece of work?
You are so right. I mean, there's so many amazing books, starting with his own work and obviously with his comrades and other writers and so on. But what's different about this book is, as the title suggests, it's 100 short stories.
Oh, wow.
So each one stands on its own, so you can dip into the book and you can read one little story. It's a couple of pages long. And it's an accessible book. So that was the main thing that we wanted to achieve with this book, was something that anyone could read. Any South African, you don't have to be a historian, you don't have to be a Mandela scholar, you don't have to be interested in politics. They're human stories, beautiful stories, and quite a nice range of stories. So that's really what made this, what sort of really made this different from other books, I think.
Well, you speak about a range of stories. I mean, Tata Madiba's had many moments. You've captured 100 of them and packaged them here. How did you specifically choose which 100 stories to put in the book?
It was so difficult.
Imagine.
Yeah, obviously I read a lot of his work and other people's works and so on. There's certain things that had to be in the book. So of course you had to have, say, the capture story of when he was captured, the speech from the dock, the Rugby World Cup with Francois Pienaar, obviously the inauguration and so on. So there were those kinds of stories. But then what I looked for were stories that had their own impact. So they could stand on their own and be beautiful or amusing or poignant or sad, whatever the case may be, that had their own kind of texture to them. And often I was looking for things that people hadn't necessarily seen. So even though you had to have the kind of bones of his story, I was looking for things that told you something different about him or that people hadn't read before.
I love that.
And so it was lovely. It was lovely trying to find those stories. And people have told me that they've learned from the book, and they've seen interesting aspects of him maybe they hadn't seen before. So
because that was going to be my next question to you. How does retelling these stories in your own words give the reader a kind of deeper understanding of who Tata Madiba was?
I think that I tried to look at different aspects, not only of his history, but also of his personality. So there's Madiba the revolutionary, for example, and I think that when we look at Mandela, particularly the people who are younger, we're more familiar with his latter years. So we remember him as the president and then as the sort of elder. But for example, I found so many interesting stories about him as a younger man, when he was the commander-in-chief of MK, when he was the volunteer-in-chief of the Defiance campaign. And I think that a lot of readers, a lot of South Africans maybe aren't so familiar with those aspects of his history, and it's important to try and get that kind of context and to see him in all those different lights, which I think makes a fuller picture.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, this book is in chronological order. Yes. Telling 8 sort of pieces of the story. Why have you chosen to tell it in that way?
So if you read the book from beginning to end, you'll get a basic biography of Nelson Mandela. Not every single thing that ever happened to him, obviously, but you can actually read it that way. Or you can dip in and read the little 2-page stories one by one. And altogether it gives you a really nice sort of history of South Africa at the same time. So yeah, we talk about him I write about him as a child and as a young man and as a student, and then obviously his activist years and so on, as a prisoner, as a president. So it really works. It functions on 2 levels, and the book isn't very long. That's the other thing that's quite important to know about it. It comes in at around 200 pages, so you can read. Yeah, not everyone's up for 500 pages, or and all of it is stuff that you'll relate to on a kind of a human level. So it's not like the Codessa 2 negotiations in detail or whatever. So
it's basically something for everyone.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And I think it would be nice for A lot of people have told me that they'd buy it for overseas visitors if someone's coming out or whatever, because it does give us South African history. I think young people, I mean, I've got teenage kids, they've read it, they've enjoyed it. But I think anyone, any South African would find something enjoyable and fun and interesting.
Well,
Ooh,
Kate,
okay.
thank you so much for being here and, of course, bringing this beautiful piece of literature and artwork into our lives. We're here for it. I can't wait to start reading it as well. And, of course, that's just another piece of Tata Madiba that I think we're all going to hold dear to our hearts.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy it.
Yay, definitely. Well, 100 Mandela Moments is a new book by author Kate Sidley, and it's available now from all major bookstores.